Okay, welcome everyone to the Poetry Box Live. Doug Stone is a fourth generation Oregonian and lives with his wife amid hop yards and vineyards near the Willamette River in Benton County, Oregon. In past life, he has worked on a county road crew, been a grocery store clerk, a caseworker, and an analyst and consultant on public policy issues to state governments, AARP, and the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. He has won the Oregon Poetry Association's Poet Choice Award. His poems have been published in numerous journals and in the anthology, A Ritual to Read Together, Poems in Conversation with William Stafford. He has authored two other collections of poetry, The Season of Distress and Clarity and The Moon's Soul Shimmering on the Water. This is his most recent book that we published this summer. And please welcome Doug Stone.
Thank you, Shawn. And thank you all for sharing part of your Saturday afternoon with us. What I want to read from is my new book, Sitting in Powell's, Watching Burnside Dissolve in Rain. This is the book. I think it's an apropos book for this evening, at least where I'm living. I'll start with the title poem. Sitting in Powell's, watching Burnside dissolve in rain. Eliot got it wrong. April isn't the cruelest month. It's January, and I'm sitting in Powell's watching Burnside dissolve in rain. This is a time of year when it's hard to live in Portland. Even its bright, sharp weirdness has faded away in this incessant rain until nothing's left but a dull gray city. As the afternoon begins to droop like winter-weary eyes, headlights and taillights ignite the traffic spray and Burnside glows like a dying ember. Sidewalks fill with locals hunched under umbrellas, pushing like patient salmon against the constant downpour. I want to go to Phoenix. That poem, maybe it's somebody who just moved here and during our Goldilocks summer and then is paying the price when reality sets in the wintertime. We all have to really make our peace with the weather and with rain. And this is a poem that the voice is somebody who's made that peace. Letter from Oregon. When I first arrived, I was told I would feel a sadness in the rain-soaked winter light as if something was lost and might never be found again. Then I learned to listen to the rain and walk without the burden of my shadow. Here the rain tells the truth about everything it touches. The hard city truth of glistening concrete, glass, and steel. The soft, lush truth of those things green and living. The quiet truth of a landscape always under low-slung clouds flourishing in the song of winter rain. On those rare days when the winter sun ignites the sky, it tries to tell me the weight of my shadow is a gift. But I no longer trust the promise of bright, cold light. Rain will be gray. That is the nature of rain. But it will never be indifferent, and it will never lie. That, too, is the nature of rain. It's interesting, though, when people move to Oregon, sometimes where you come from never really leaves you, and that's often the case. But sometimes people don't make their peace with Oregon. And actually, I think my grandmother on my dad's side, that was her case, I think. Wonderful lady. The power of place in memory of my grandmother. Here on the Oregon coast, rain squalls have been shouldering off the ocean all afternoon. Between squalls, the January sun troubles down the left margin of the sky like a misspelled word, neither warm nor bright, just wrong. The ocean looks like a vast sheet of crumpled steel. My grandmother never liked the ocean. It couldn't be trusted. It moved like a surly, shifty thug. She came from the Midwest, where the land was firm and honest all the way to the horizon. Another squall blows over me, and I remember how she never cared for our long gray season of rain. If I really wanted to see her glow, I'd ask her about Iowa winters. thick, deep snow, she'd say, so white it burned your eyes. The glass-sharp sky so blue you could hear it crack. She'd close her eyes and still hear the laughter of long-dead loved ones ringing in the frozen air. My grandmother lived here almost 70 years and died at 92, her memory racked with dementia so bad she often didn't know where she was. But sometimes she'd close her eyes and through the murky gray of her dementia, she'd see that young school teacher she was before she came west. And she would recite the names of Iowa's 99 counties in alphabetical order. Requiem for Celilo Falls. When I was a kid, we used to stop on our way to my granddad's place in Eastern Washington. As we walked toward the sound of the falls, I heard the air shatter, felt the ground quiver. It was the ancient voices of all those rivers that make up the Columbia thrashed to a single angry roar by the clenched fists of the rocks, then tossed over the falls in a swirling froth of white water and mist, full of leaping salmon. The roar of the falls is caged in my memory. I can still hear that anger these many years after the dams lobotomized those ancient voices into the placid silence of the Columbia that can't remember how to be a river anymore. I know if you ever drive on I-84 about 8 miles east of the Dalles, there'll be a sign on the highway saying Celilo Falls, and if you look over to the river, there's no falls, of course. I was only 10 when they actually finished the Dalles Dam and closed the last spillway. And in 4 hours, they totally flooded the falls. Let's go to Eastern Oregon. An old barn near Fort Rock. The high desert wanders off in all directions as if lost in its own emptiness. An old barn pummeled by 100 years of weather slouches in the sagebrush like a fighter trying to cover up, waiting for someone to stop the fight. The hot afternoon wind leans hard against the barn's last good side, body punching with gusts until I can hear its bones crack and pop. Punch drunk, wobbly kneed, quivering like it has for decades, the old barn still stands, not out of tenacity or the will to survive. It stands because it can't remember how to fall. I want to read a couple of road poems, Oregon road poems. The first one is the Wilson River Road. And if you remember William Stafford's probably most well-loved poem, Traveling Through the Dark, he finds himself on the Wilson River Road. Interesting enough, he finds himself on a road that he would later describe himself as, in scenery, I like flat country. In life, I don't like much to happen. And he found himself on not flat ground and a lot that was going on. The Wilson River Road, thinking of William Stafford. The Wilson River Road can be a nasty stretch of asphalt, especially at night, shouldering through the mountains like a mean drunk staggering toward the coast. But this road is also a poem reciting its way along the river, its sharp swerves and curves, poetry of pavement reading the mountain dark. It is a road of shadows, the river's voice, and south wind dancing in the trees. A road like life, so many turns, so many decisions, so many places where it can all go wrong. And midway through your journey, you may wonder if the trip was really worth it. But as your headlights search for that final curve near the end of the road, you feel the ocean breathe new life into your soul. You're no longer just traveling through the dark. Now you know you've been on the right road all along. Now I'd like to go to a road that's probably the polar opposite of the Wilson River Road. Let's go into Eastern Oregon again. This would be a road that William Stafford would like a lot. somewhere between Bend and Boise. I'm lost in tire song on this two-lane blacktop, my windshield splattered with stars. High beams hollow out the dark as I power down this unfamiliar road. But on this endless empty highway, there is no danger except to die alone in wreckage of my own making. Here in the middle of nowhere, I don't need or want a map. I'm in this perfect sweet spot where my future is just the road beyond my high beams, my past, an empty rearview mirror. Boy, I can't wait to put 2020 in my rearview mirror. This poem's for any of you who are big sisters, or any of you that have a big sister. I'm not a big sister, and I don't have a big sister, but I've got a little sister, so maybe this poem's for her. I think she may be listening in Kansas City. Big sister. I see her at the end of our lane, a silhouette against the winter sky, waiting for the school bus. She could be on the moon for all I care. After hearing "hurry up or you'll be late" one too many times, I'm still sitting on the porch in a little heap of big sister resentment when I hear the bus gear down, slowing for our stop. Panic scores through me like an electric shock. The rule is simple. The school bus never waits. Knowing I'll hear "I told you so" forever, I start to run, but fall on the gravel, splayed and bleeding. Homework cartwheeling off in all directions as the bus hisses to a stop. Each window frames a face staring at the flailing catastrophe that is me. The bus rocks and sees impatiently as the doors swing open for my sister. Beyond all misery and despair, the only thing I know to do is scream out her name. She hesitates, the driver frowns. She glances back at me, then slowly shakes her head. The doors slam shut, gears grind angrily, and with a shuddering lurch, the bus is gone. Her eyes are slits as she walks past me towards the inquisition that waits for us. She knows our mother will find more fault with her than me. That's what big sisters are for. As I follow like shabby, unclaimed baggage, bobbing in the wake of her disgust, the only thing that matters is she waited. I'm old enough, I'm probably at the cusp of or the beginning of the baby booming tidal wave. And when the baby boomers started school, there weren't enough school buses, and that really was the rule. The school bus never waits. If you weren't on time, that's the way it was. So anyway. To the barista at Starbucks who told me caramel macchiato isn't the heroine in Two Gentlemen of Verona. Some coffee orders are short stories. Some are long as War and Peace, great sweeping narratives of blends, roasts, flavors, milks, temperatures, with or without whipped foam, cream, shots, double shots, extra shots, more shots in the 1812 overture. First time I heard caramel macchiato, cappuccino, americano, frappuccino, I thought the baristas were talking about characters in Two Gentlemen of Verona. The complexity of it all hits home when I'm behind a woman whose coffee order defines her whole reason for being. She takes a deep breath and begins her litany of demands longer than Luther's 95 Theses, more complicated than the Treaty of Versailles. When she demands milk from Himalayan goats that only graze above 13,000 feet, I think the guy behind me is going to have a stroke. 20 minutes later, she's finally done, and the great engine of the coffee industry leaps to life, processing her order with hisses, gurgles, wheezes, whistles, rattles, bangs. The whole coffee shop sees like a steel mill. Then she asks for a pen, takes out a checkbook, and with the flair of John Hancock, she writes. The woman looks like she expects applause, but the line that now stretches through the shop and around the block only glares in stunned silence. The weary barista nods at me, and I move to the cash register as if to center stage, clear my throat and recite my little poem. Coffee, please, nothing more. Dark and hot. Let it pour. I'd like to read 3 poems for Oregon artists. 2 are writers and one's a visual artist. Thinking of Ursula K. Le Guin. The word must be heard in silence. There must be darkness to see the stars. Ursula K. Le Guin. Walking in her beloved Steens, she stops to take in the long view at day's end. She watches the last thoughts of light drift across the high desert quiet and set the river gleaming like a ribbon trailing from the hand of a child, running off to the edge of the earth, where stars begin to sing their silent songs for her in the cathedral of the darkening sky. This poem's for a visual artist, Rick Bartow. He's a Native American artist. He lived in Newport. Incredible artist. Things you know but cannot explain. In memory of Rick Bartow, Native American artist, died April 2nd, 2016. The morning of the day Rick left eased comfortably into itself, the way days do on the coast when winter is finally forgotten. The tides had their busy schedules to keep. The gulls squabbled among themselves on the beach or spiraled above the waves, shaping the cool spring wind to their liking. Newport busied itself with its Saturday business. By all accounts, the day he left was ordinary. But Crow knew the day an artist leaves is no ordinary day. That afternoon, in his last dream, Rick gathered all the stories he'd run out of time to tell and asked Crow to give them back to coyote, owl, salmon, back to all the animals who told those stories to him because they trusted the honesty of his art. That evening, Rick walked through his mind one last time and packed those things he wanted to take with him on his next journey, things you know but cannot explain. When Crow asked if he was ready, Rick took the last few breaths his tired heart could give him and left this life for his next. A spirit now of the universe, no less than the trees, the animals, and the stars. Things You Know But Cannot Explain is the title of a retrospective of Rick's art that was touring the United States at the time of his death in 2016. And that retrospective is still touring the United States. In fact, it was this year, I think, early on this year, it was in Los Angeles. If it ever comes back to Oregon and you get a chance to see it, do it. In memory of Peter Sears. Peter Sears was our 7th poet laureate. And my poetry owes a lot to Peter. The generosity of him was incredible. So this is in his memory. In memory of Peter Sears, poet, teacher, friend. I believe that when I hear a poem, I hear the silences between the words. Peter Sears. Auden said the death of the poet was kept from his poems, but he was wrong. When poets die, their poems know and they grieve. For Peter, there came the time when time had run its course, when every breath he tried to take was broken and he had no more distance left in him. His poems knew he was dying. He kept no secrets from his poems. The honesty of his poetry had given them the strength to know the truth. When Peter stepped from this life into his next, his poems understood. He had prepared them well to be poems in a world without the poet. They grieved. Oh, they grieved, but did so only in the silences between the words. Peter's generosity was such, I was taking a workshop from him, and after the workshop, he caught me and he said, you know, you really do need to put a book together. Send me 40 poems and I'll go through them and I'll pick 20 that I think might make the basis of a good book. I'm not going to edit them. I'm just tell you what I think. And he did. And sent those poems off with a few more, and it was accepted. And that generosity obviously will never be forgotten. I'd like to finish with a poem. This is a poem that in the book falls in a series of poems that's it's like a poetic correspondence between Li Bai and Du Fu, the famous Tang Dynasty poets. This poem actually came out of one of Peter's workshops, and it's a poem he liked a lot. It's the only poem in the workshop, I think, that he actually only found two things, I think, that I definitely had to change. But it's interesting, this poem has taken on a different meaning for me in a way since the pandemic. It kind of represents the desolation and particularly around poetry, that I've kind of felt. But I think at the ending, I think it has a glimmer of hope. At least I hope it does. Wandering deep into autumn, Li Bai to Du Fu. My mind is fallow as these autumn fields. Every mile is no different than the last. I haven't written anything for weeks. Last night I read my old spring poems again, but they only made me sad, so I left them at the side of the road and walked away. At first light across these empty fields, I saw my poems scattering from the pockets of the wind, and like a swirl of dead leaves, they were gone. This autumn morning, I think of you as I watch wild geese spiral up from the river and gather themselves into such lovely lines. The sky becomes the poem I would write for you, but my words wither in the presence of these birds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. That was absolutely gorgeous. Your tribute to Peter Sears. I wasn't lucky enough to have met him, but I've heard so many wonderful things about him and his work. And I gotta say, the Caramel Macchiato poem probably has the best title ever and makes me laugh every single time. So I'm really glad you shared that with us on this rainy Oregon day to make us all laugh. So thank you for that. So thanks again for joining us today. Take care and be safe wherever you are.